Welcome to the premiere episode of the Perfect Storm podcast. My name is Michael, and I'm excited and honored that you've taken a few minutes out of your day to see what this is all about. This is a deeply personal project for me, and I hope to connect with others in a meaningful way through Perfect Storm content. All right, let's dive into episode 1. The Perfect Storm podcast, much like my life, exists at the convergence of 3 big ideas: mental health, organized religion, and creative aspirations. These 3 things came together to disastrous effect in my life, both personally and professionally, creating a kind of perfect storm. I have a feeling I'm not alone. I created this project so I could tell my story as it continues to unfold and build a community of people working through these types of issues. Mental health, organized religion, and creative aspirations. You don't see these 3 ideas bundled together very often, and it's not immediately apparent how they could combine into something so destructive. If you'll hang in there with me, I'll deconstruct the whole thing. Let's start by looking at each of these 3 big ideas in the context of my story, and then we can look at how they converged poorly. To be honest, I don't know how to encapsulate a lifetime of chronic mental health issues into a soundbite. If I start getting into detail or providing examples, then we could be here all day. I'll want to save that for episode 2. Suffice it to say, there is widespread mental illness and predation in my family. My sister and I were born into an abusive and neglectful household. Once those patterns of toxicity developed, they followed me around for the rest of my life and began to compound. I developed all sorts of mental health issues that have prevented me from leading a healthy or productive life. Through sheer will, I slowly pulled myself together enough to achieve a thin veneer of health and stability, though psychologically I remained in chaos until I decided to make sweeping changes in pursuit of mental health. In March, I began seeing a trauma specialist regularly, and now I see her every week. We're slowly working through my personal history, and I'm projecting that I'll be in intense therapy for probably 2 solid years before I take a break. I've also binged audiobooks and mental health podcasts, read articles. I'm actually learning a lot about neuroscience and the power of things like EMDR, meditation, exercise, yoga, and the benefits of sleep and nutrition. I'm also taking magnesium supplements, which was my wife's idea. The current consensus is that my mental health issues stem from childhood trauma, and those issues were compounded by later experiences, a death by 1,000 cuts sort of thing. There is a possible diagnosis, but it's not yet recognized in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. I'm referring, of course, to developmental trauma disorder. I learned all about this when I read The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. To quote van der Kolk, research has shown that traumatic childhood experiences are not only extremely common, they also have a profound impact on many different areas of functioning. For example, children exposed to alcoholic parents or domestic violence rarely have secure childhoods. Their symptomology tends to be pervasive and multifaceted, and is likely to include depression, various medical illnesses, as well as a variety of impulsive and self-destructive behaviors. Approaching each of these problems piecemeal, rather than as an expression of a vast system of internal disorganization, runs a risk of losing sight of the forest in favor of one tree. Mental health is my number 1 goal, personally, for my household, and for all the people I care about. The pursuit of better mental health is what led me to the Perfect Storm model. I find it very useful as a tool to conceptualize the working dynamics of my story, to figure out what went wrong, and to help me find a path out of here. That will be the primary focus of this project for now. So let's talk about religion. I spent most of my life involved with Christian organizations, starting with Jimmy Swaggart Ministries in the 1980s, and ending several years ago at a derivative organization. All those years, I straddled the fence between the church and the world at large, never really fitting into either group. I never completely gave myself over to the church, but I let them influence me heavily, leading me to make life-altering decisions and big compromises that did not benefit me. Though I have a lot to say about what I experienced, plenty of people out there have had similar experiences at other evangelical churches. And starting with the Gen Xers, it seems there's an ever-growing contingent of people who grow up and leave the church. Some are outspoken about their experiences of early indoctrination and the harm they suffered through involvement in organized religion. Serious indictments have been levied against Jimmy Swaggart and his ilk, and of evangelical Christianity in general. I'm not a theologian or an expert commentator on these topics. I'm just a guy who grew up with one foot in the church and one in the secular world. I had a really bad experience growing up in the evangelical church, and in 2015, I also came forward to talk about some of my experiences through a series of blog posts, and I'll link to those in the description. Parting from organized religion tends to set people on a journey as they try to reconcile what they previously believed with what they believe now with science, history, and popular culture. Stepping away can be very disorienting and leaves you without the comfort of a community or boundaries. At my age, I struggle to maintain a social life or find a group of like-minded people to which I can belong. I hold to the belief that Jesus is who he said he was. Yet, everything I know about him and what he supposedly said comes from a Bible that I now find questionable. I look at Bob Lazar and think, yep, seems legit. I'm completely open to a theory that reconciles early accounts of Jesus Christ with evidence of advanced alien life like that purported by Lazar and Corbell. For example, perhaps Jesus is the Messiah, but he belongs to an advanced alien race that seeded biological life on Earth. I mean, it sounds crazy, I know, but I'm just in a weird place, and it is very lonely, but I'd rather be here than back in the Matrix. I've lived my life with a lot of unfulfilled creative aspirations, but to just say that, I mean, you run the risk of coming off as delusional. You don't know, maybe my dreams are dumb. We're gonna do marionettes in space! My parents both came from families of intellectuals and creative people who loved art and storytelling. So my sister and I each got a double dose of all those artistic genes. She excelled at visual and performing arts. I was drawn to comedy, acting, music, and writing. I performed in skits, talent shows, and theater productions at school, church, or wherever I could with great enthusiasm. Still, it wasn't my primary focus. I was perfectly happy playing with my toys and my friends and going to Chuck E. Cheese. In middle school, I started learning how to play musical instruments. And although I continued to act from time to time, music became my primary creative outlet. In high school, the guitar was my identity, and I just sort of went through the motions with academics. This is where the convergence of ideas starts. A pattern developed in childhood that persisted through my teens. I was naturally drawn to any opportunity to perform or tell stories, like a moth to the flame. My love was pure, for the sake of the art. But it was only a matter of time before my attention would get pulled to some more pressing unmet need. My home life was chaotic, and as I progressed further through school, no one held me accountable for my falling grades, behavioral problems, or general lack of direction. I had to focus on defending myself from bullies and on getting my emotional needs met, whatever it took. By high school, I was lost in the whirlwind of my mental illness. I had my first taste of female companionship, and when that relationship ended unexpectedly, I was destroyed. I desperately needed to get back into another relationship, and I began to pursue all my unmet needs in that context. It became a total obsession unlike anything else I've experienced. The only thing that garnered positive attention from my parents, or anyone else for that matter, was performing. Rather than do it for the love of the art, it became a means to an end. When I was 14, my friends and I started a band for the express purpose of performing in the fall talent show at my high school and getting girlfriends. I was like Sam from Love Actually, except there was no specific girl. Well, We nailed our performance at the talent show, and everyone lost their minds. It was a defining moment for me. It was literally the only time my parents showed any interest in what I did during high school. As for my stated goal, the girls who represented the top of the social hierarchy were flirting with me left and right. Every time I turned around, there was another pretty upperclassman telling me how sexy I was. I cannot overstate my shock at receiving this kind of attention for the first time. The velvet rope opened, and my group of misfit friends all turned on me as I was embraced by the popular crowd. Well, it didn't last, and when it was over, I was alone. I spent the rest of my school experience chasing that high, but it was never as good as the first time. Whenever I got involved with a girl, I would abandon all creative projects or activities to focus on our relationship. All right, let me land this plane. To a kid growing up in Middle America, cut off from the entertainment industry culturally and geographically, the idea that I would one day become a famous actor or rock star seemed like a pipe dream. It would be a vow of poverty until I either made it or quit. I'd have to be continuously firing on all cylinders, willing to forsake everything else in my life for this singular focus, just to have a fraction of a chance. Conversely, in Christian culture, following Jesus meant the wholesale rejection of mainstream culture, of all the music, images, literature, films, and television about which I was so passionate. My need for love and acceptance in a romantic relationship outweighed my need for creative fulfillment by just enough to tip the balance toward a relationship every time. The Christian church railed against premarital sex, including masturbation and lust. You're not even allowed to desire someone. When you consider how much I look to female companionship for emotional comfort and security, it's clear to see how I was being torn apart by these conflicting motivations. I became convinced that the only way to reconcile my faith with my romantic desires was to white-knuckle it through abstinence and get married as young as possible. And the only feasible way to get married that quickly was to forsake my creative aspirations in lieu of a stable career path. The only way to reconcile my faith with my creative aspirations was to give them up and use my creative ability however the church saw fit. And considering how much I compromised myself in the name of my faith, you really must ask yourself whether I was trying to please God or to win the approval of people in my church. I put all my eggs in the church basket, so imagine how it would feel to find out that the church you sacrificed so much to serve turned out to be run by a completely corrupt leadership. Imagine how devastating it would be to slowly discover that you made all those life-altering decisions for a group of people who would never accept you. Imagine how it would feel to find out it was all a lie. The pattern established during childhood continued well into my 20s. I was caught up in the eye of a perfect storm, and my life went wherever the current pulled me. It wasn't until I started making decisions in my own best interest, despite church leaders' disapproval, that I experienced breakthrough. While maintaining involvement in ministry, I started freelancing as a professional musician outside the church, sought mental health counseling outside the church, lost weight and met a girl outside the church, got married, bought a house, lived my life. I kept serving at my church, but I just couldn't figure out why I didn't thrive there, regardless of what decisions I made. That is, until one fateful day when it all became clear. More to come on that. Mental health, organized religion, and my creative aspirations all converged to disastrous effect in my life. They combined in just such a way to yield a worst-case scenario. Trying to contend with all these issues simultaneously rendered me inert. All efforts to improve in one were perpetually thwarted by the existence of the other two. In the end, I had to focus on one and let the others fall by the wayside, possibly forever. I chose to prioritize my mental health, and I think I made the right choice. What do you think?